They sell out stadiums in minutes, break records like it's breakfast, and move with a precision that makes you forget they're human. But here's the thing nobody talks about enough. Behind every flawless choreography, behind every high-note hit under blinding stage lights, there's a body pushed to its absolute limit, and sometimes that body breaks. We're talking torn ligaments, emergency surgeries, collapsing mid-performance, car accidents that nearly ended careers before they even started. 7 members, 7 stories of pain you probably scrolled right past. But today, we're ranking them. Which BTS member has endured the most physical injuries throughout their career, and which one sits at number 1 with a history so brutal it'll make you wonder how he's still standing on that stage at all? Was it the member known for his powerful dance moves who kept hiding his pain behind a smile? Or was it the one whose accident happened before the world even knew his name? Could it be the idol who literally performed with bandages under his costume and never said a word? Think you already know? Trust me, you don't. Some of these stories have been buried under years of "I'm fine" and fan service smiles. So buckle up, because this list isn't just about injuries. It's about resilience, sacrifice, and what it truly costs to be BTS. Let's start the countdown from number 7, all the way down to the one member who's been through more physical pain than any idol should ever have to endure. Number 7. Jimin. The dancer who starved his own body until it fought back. You'd think the most graceful mover on that stage would be the last one to break, right? Wrong. Park Jimin, the man whose contemporary dance background made every BTS choreography look like liquid poetry, landed at the bottom of this list, not because his injuries were minor, but because his pain was the kind that crept in slowly, silently, and almost entirely self-inflicted before it ever became visible. See, Jimin's story doesn't start with a dramatic stage fall or a freak accident. It starts with a mirror, a scale, and a teenage boy from Busan who convinced himself he wasn't good enough. During BTS's debut era around 2013 and 2014, Jimin has openly admitted in interviews and on the group's own content that he went through extreme dieting, sometimes eating only one meal across 10 days. Let that sink in. One meal. 10 days. While rehearsing 6, 7, sometimes 12 hours a day for choreography that would make a professional athlete collapse. His body was essentially running on nothing, and it showed not immediately on camera, because Jimin is the kind of performer who will smile through a hurricane, but internally, the damage was stacking up like invisible debt. His muscles were deteriorating, his immune system was wrecked, and his physical endurance, the very thing a performance-heavy idol needs most, was being eaten alive by malnutrition he thought was discipline. And the worst part? Nobody stopped him early enough, because the K-pop industry at the time practically rewarded that kind of self-destruction. Fans noticed the weight fluctuations. They noticed the sharper jawline, the thinner frame during certain comebacks, and they worried loudly on social media. But the full picture didn't come together until Jimin himself started talking about it years later, calling it one of his biggest regrets. Now, fast forward to December 2016, the MBC Gayo Dijijian rehearsal. This is where the consequences of years of pushing a depleted body finally showed up in the most public way possible. Jimin collapsed. Not a stumble, not a feeling dizzy moment, he went down, and staff had to attend to him backstage. Reports at the time indicated severe muscle fatigue combined with what was described as flu-like symptoms, but armies who'd been tracking his condition knew this wasn't just a cold. This was a body screaming for rest that it had never been given. He'd been performing at an insane pace throughout the entire Wings tour era, delivering some of the most physically demanding solo stages BTS had ever put together alive. Alone required a level of contemporary dance athleticism that would drain a fully healthy performer, and Jimin was doing it night after night while his body was still recovering from years of nutritional abuse. But here's what makes Jimin's chapter in this list uniquely heartbreaking: he almost never stopped. Even after collapsing, even after members like Taehyung and Jungkook were visibly worried about him on camera, Jimin would bounce back the very next schedule with a smile and perform as if nothing had happened. There are fan-taken concert videos from 2017 and 2018 where you can catch him subtly rolling his neck between songs, adjusting his shoulders in a way that screams discomfort, and occasionally wincing during heavy choreography sections. But he never left the stage. He never asked for a lighter part. He never publicly complained. During the 2018 Melon Music Awards, one of BTS's most legendary performance stages ever, Jimin delivered a solo intro that involved him being lifted, spun, and dropped by backup dancers in sequences that required full trust in his own body, a body that had been through more physical stress than most people twice his age. He nailed it, obviously, because he's Jimin, but behind the scenes, multiple accounts from staff and fellow trainees over the years have described him as the member most likely to push past pain without telling anyone until it became impossible to hide. His neck and back issues became a recurring theme. Fans spotted him wearing discreet support braces under his stage outfits, and there were moments during fan meetings where he'd visibly shift his posture to avoid pressure on certain areas. These weren't catastrophic, headline-making injuries. They were the slow, grinding kind, the type that comes from years of overtraining on an underfueled body, the type that physical therapists see in athletes who never learned to rest because rest felt like failure. And that's the emotional core of Jimin's placement at number 7. His injuries weren't always dramatic enough to make the news, but they were persistent enough to shape his entire relationship with his own body. He's spoken in later years, particularly during album promotions and Weverse lives, about learning to eat properly, about understanding that taking care of himself isn't weakness, and about the guilt he felt when he realized his self-neglect worried the people who loved him. It's a quiet kind of pain, the Jimin kind. Not a broken bone that gets a cast and heals in 6 weeks, but a pattern of damage that takes years to undo and leaves marks you can't always see. He sits at number 7 not because his suffering was small, but because in the rankings ahead, the injuries get louder, more sudden, and in some cases, nearly career-ending. But if Jimin taught us anything, it's that the injuries you can't see are sometimes the ones that cut the deepest. Now, if you think a dancer slowly breaking down from the inside was hard to watch, wait until you hear about the member at number 6, whose injury hit so suddenly during a live broadcast that even the staff didn't know what to do. Number 6. V. The stage prince whose own skin turned against him every time he performed. Imagine this. You're one of the most visually iconic performers on the planet. Your face has literally been called a work of art by international media outlets. And every time you step on stage under those scorching lights and give everything you've got to a choreography, your own body punishes you for it. That's not a metaphor. That's not poetic exaggeration. That is the actual, medically diagnosed reality that Taehyung V of BTS has lived with for years, and most casual fans have absolutely no idea how much it costs him physically to do what he does. V was diagnosed with cholinergic urticaria, a chronic skin condition where the body essentially becomes allergic to its own heat. When his core temperature rises, which, let's be real, happens within the first 30 seconds of any BTS choreography, his skin erupts in painful hives, rashes, and intense itching that can spread across his torso, arms, and neck. We're not talking about a little redness. We're talking about a condition that dermatologists describe as feeling like thousands of tiny needles pressing into the skin simultaneously, triggered by the exact thing his job requires him to do every single day: sweat. Think about the absurdity of that for a moment. This man is part of a group whose choreography routinely ranks among the most intense in all of K-pop, routines for Idol, On, Dionysus, and Mic Drop that leave even the backup dancers gasping, and every single time he executes those moves, his skin is literally revolting against him. There's no cure for cholinergic urticaria. There's management, antihistamines, controlled exposure, cooling protocols, but there's no switch you flip to turn it off. It's chronic, it's unpredictable, and for a performer who can't exactly say, hold on, let me cool down in the middle of a stadium show in front of 60,000 people. It's a constant invisible battle that he fights under layers of stage makeup and long-sleeved outfits that fans sometimes thought were just fashion choices. They weren't always fashion choices. Sometimes those high-necked shirts and layered jackets during summer concerts were strategic, covering the angry red welts that would bloom across his skin mid-performance. And here's what breaks your heart if you go back and watch certain fan cams with this knowledge. You can catch moments, subtle ones, where V's hand drifts to his side between formations, not in a stylistic gesture, but in a quick, almost reflexive scratch that he immediately suppresses because the camera is on him. He trained himself to hide it. He learned the angles. He knew which transitions gave him a half-second to adjust without anyone noticing, and he weaponized his own charisma to make sure that when fans looked at him, they saw the performance, not the pain underneath. But cholinergic urticaria wasn't V's only physical struggle. During live concerts across multiple tour legs, there were documented moments where Taehyung collided with stage equipment, camera rigs, moving platforms, extended mic stands, resulting in visible bruises and, on at least one occasion, a noticeable bump to the head that he played off with his signature boxy smile before anyone could panic. There's a particular fan cam from one of BTS's concert tours, widely circulated among ARMYs, where V takes a hit from a piece of stage rigging during a transition and doesn't even flinch. He absorbs the impact, keeps moving into the next formation, and only after the song ends does he briefly touch the spot with a grimace he thinks nobody caught. But somebody always catches it. Fans are forensic analysts with love as their motivation, and the clips went viral with worried hashtags trending within hours. Then there were the nosebleeds, moments during or after intense performances where V was spotted dealing with sudden nosebleeds likely triggered by the combination of extreme physical exertion, dehydration, and the dry, heated air of indoor arenas. These weren't frequent enough to become a headline pattern, but they happened more than once, and each time, V handled it with the same quiet, almost stubborn refusal to let it become a thing. He'd tilt his head back, someone would hand him a tissue, and he'd carry on as if his body hadn't just sent him a very clear signal to slow down. What makes V's position at number 6 so compelling is the nature of his struggle. It wasn't one catastrophic event. It was a chronic, ongoing condition layered on top of the normal wear and tear of being an idol, which meant that every single performance carried an extra cost that his groupmates didn't have to pay. Jimin pushed through exhaustion and the aftermath of self-neglect. V pushed through a body that was biologically wired to resist the very activity that defined his career. And he did it with a stage presence so magnetic that entire concert arenas would lose their collective minds the moment he made eye contact with a camera. That's not just talent, that's defiance. It's a man looking at a medical diagnosis that could have easily justified stepping back, taking fewer dance-heavy parts, requesting modified choreography, and choosing instead to show up at full intensity every single time, knowing exactly what it would feel like by the second chorus. His pain was renewable. It came back every show, every rehearsal, every time the lights went up and the bass dropped. And yet, if you ask V about it, he talks about it with the casual deflection of someone who's made peace with a reality he can't change, not because it doesn't hurt, but because the alternative, which is not performing, would hurt worse. That's the kind of quiet, chronic bravery that doesn't make headlines the way a broken bone does, but it shapes an entire career in ways most people never see. V sits at number 6 because his battle was permanent, invisible, and fought on a nightly basis under the world's brightest spotlight. But if you think a chronic condition managed in silence is intense, wait until you hear about number 5, the member who took a hit so hard during a live event that the footage still makes fans gasp years later. Number 5. Jungkook. The golden magne who refused to stop running even when his body already had. Here's what you need to understand about Jungkook before we even get into the injuries. This is a man who treats every stage like it might be his last. Not in a dramatic, melancholic way, but in a way where every ounce of energy stored in his body gets detonated the second the music starts. He doesn't walk to his formation, he sprints. He doesn't execute choreography, he attacks it. He doesn't hit his marks, he launches past them with a physicality so raw and explosive that you sometimes forget he's singing live at the same time. That approach, that beautiful, reckless, full-throttle commitment to performance, is exactly what made him the golden magne in the first place. And it's exactly what put him on this list. Because a body that never holds back is a body that's always one wrong landing away from breaking, and Jungkook's body has cashed those checks more than once. Let's start with a big one, October 2018, London, the O2 Arena, during BTS's Love Yourself World Tour. This was supposed to be a monumental moment. BTS performing in one of Europe's most iconic venues. Tickets sold out in minutes. Armies from across the continent packed into that arena ready to lose their minds. And then the announcement came. Jungkook had injured his heel. Not a minor tweak. Not a he'll walk it off situation. A genuine heel injury significant enough that Big Hit Entertainment, a company that historically downplayed member health issues to avoid alarm, released an official statement acknowledging it and warning fans that Jungkook's participation would be modified. Modified. For the member whose entire stage identity is built on explosive movement, acrobatic energy, and being everywhere at once, modified might as well have been a death sentence to his performer's ego. And what did Jungkook do? Did he sit backstage? Did he take the medically responsible route and rest? Of course not. This is Jungkook. He performed the entire concert sitting on a chair. Picture that, the most dynamic performer in the group, the one who normally flies across the stage like gravity, is a suggestion he politely declines, anchored to a single spot on a stool, singing every note, hitting every vocal run, and using nothing but his upper body and facial expressions to deliver a performance that still somehow had fans sobbing in the audience. Fan-taken videos from that night are still circulated to this day, and they're gut-wrenching in the best way. You can see it on his face, the frustration of not being able to move, the flash of pain when he shifts his weight wrong, but also this iron-willed determination to give those fans everything he possibly can within the constraints of a body that's betraying him. The other members adjusted around him seamlessly, covering his formations, moving closer to him during group moments so he wouldn't feel isolated. And there's a particularly devastating moment where Jimin physically moves closer to Jungkook during a men's segment and places a hand on his shoulder, a silent, brotherly gesture that said more than any words could. But here's the thing, the O2 concert revealed that hardcore fans already suspected. This wasn't an isolated incident. Jungkook's performance style had been accumulating damage for years. He was the member most likely to add extra jumps to choreography that didn't require them, most likely to improvise a spin or a knee drop during a live stage, most likely to push off a platform at full speed when a simple step down would have been perfectly fine. Every one of those choices, thrilling to watch, electric on camera, was a microtransaction with his joints, his tendons, his ligaments, and the heel injury in London was the receipt finally coming due. And it wasn't the last time. Across multiple tour stops and live event appearances throughout 2018 and 2019, fans documented a pattern of Jungkook performing with visible supports, knee braces hidden under ripped jeans, ankle wraps barely concealed by his shoes, and a subtle limp that he'd mask by turning it into a swagger during walking segments, because this man would genuinely rather create a whole new way of moving than let anyone think he's hurt. Then there was the face. At an end-of-year music festival, widely believed to be the 2019 SBS Gayo Taehyung, Jungkook appeared on stage with a clearly visible wound on his cheek. Not makeup. Not a stylistic choice. An actual scratch or abrasion that was raw enough to be noticeable under HD broadcast cameras. The company never gave a detailed explanation, and Jungkook himself didn't address it beyond brief reassurances, which of course only fueled fan concern. Theories ranged from an accident during rehearsal to a collision during one of the Physical Run BTS episodes where the members routinely threw themselves into athletic challenges with zero regard for their own safety. Whatever the cause, the visual was jarring. The face that had been voted the most handsome in the world by multiple international polls, marked with a wound he couldn't hide, performing as if nothing was different. And that's the thread that ties all of Jungkook's injuries together, the absolute, almost pathological refusal to be seen as anything less than fully operational. He doesn't have Jimin's quiet acceptance or V's casual deflection. Jungkook's coping mechanism is defiance. Raw, stubborn, watch me do it anyway defiance. He'll sit on a chair and still outsing half the industry. He'll wrap his ankle and still hit choreography harder than members with 2 functioning legs. He'll show up with a wound on his face and perform as though his reflection hasn't changed. It's inspiring and terrifying in equal measure because the same fearlessness that makes him magnetic on stage is the same fearlessness that means he'll never voluntarily pump the brakes, even when every physical therapist in the building is begging him to. Jungkook lands at number 5 because his injuries were dramatic, public, and repeated, but what separates the members above him is either the severity, the long-term consequences, or the sheer volume of damage sustained. Jungkook hit hard and bounced back fast. The members ahead of him? They hit hard and carried the wreckage for much, much longer. Speaking of which, number 4 features a member whose injury didn't just change the way he performed, it changed the way the entire group had to function around him. Number 4. Suga, the underground king who hit a shattered shoulder just to survive his own dream. This one hits different, and it hits early because Min Younghee's most devastating injury didn't happen under concert lights, didn't happen during a rehearsal, and didn't happen while millions of fans were watching. It happened on a dark street in Seoul, years before the world even knew BTS existed, when a skinny kid from Daegu was delivering food on a beat-up bicycle just to keep himself alive while chasing a dream that everyone around him said was stupid. Before the Grammy stage, before Daechwita broke the internet, before August D became one of the most respected solo projects in K-pop history, Min Younghee was a teenage trainee at a small, financially unstable company called Big Hit Entertainment. And he was broke. Not, I can't afford designer clothes, broke, genuinely, dangerously broke. He's talked about it in interviews and in his own lyrics with the kind of raw honesty that most idols would never dare. Choosing between eating and taking the bus, sleeping in the studio because he couldn't afford proper housing, and picking up part-time delivery jobs just to cover basic survival costs while training during every remaining hour. It was during one of those delivery shifts, estimated around 2012, before BTS's June 2013 debut, that Younghee was struck by a car. The details have always been kept somewhat private, but what's been confirmed through his own accounts and company statements over the years is this. The accident was serious enough to cause significant damage to his shoulder, specifically a torn labrum, the ring of cartilage that surrounds the shoulder socket and keeps the joint stable. A torn labrum is not a bruise. It's not something you ice for a week and forget. It's a structural injury that affects every single movement involving the arm, from raising it above your head to rotating it, to absorbing impact, to, and here's where it gets devastating, executing choreography that requires full upper body engagement for hours at a time. And Younghee knew, the moment it happened, that if he told Big Hit the full extent of the injury, he could be cut from the trainee lineup. Because that's how the system worked back then, and, honestly, how it still works in many companies today. Injured trainees are liabilities. They can't keep up with the training schedule, they slow down group rehearsals, and in a ruthlessly competitive environment where dozens of trainees are fighting for 7 debut spots, any sign of physical weakness is an invitation to be replaced. So Younghee made a choice, a desperate, painful, arguably reckless choice that would define the next 8 years of his physical existence. He hit it. He performed through the pain. He debuted with BTS in 2013 with a shoulder that was structurally compromised, and he kept going. Not for weeks. Not for months. For years. Let the weight of that settle in. Every single performance you watched from 2013 through 2020, every award show stage, every world tour concert, every practice session captured on Bangtan bombs, Younghee was doing it with a shoulder that was never properly healed. The choreography for tracks like Fire, Not Today, Idol, and On routines that demand aggressive arm movements, floor work, and rapid directional changes was being executed by a man whose shoulder joint was essentially held together by willpower and whatever pain management he could access without raising red flags. And if you think that sounds exaggerated, consider this. When Suga finally had surgery in November 2020 to repair the torn labrum, the procedure was described as long overdue. That's medical language for, this should have been fixed years ago, and the fact that it wasn't has made everything worse. The surgery required him to step back from all BTS activities during a critical period, right as the group was riding the historic success of Dynamite and preparing for more releases. And his recovery timeline was projected at months of rehabilitation, during which his arm would essentially need to relearn basic movements under the guidance of physical therapists. Fans who'd followed Suga closely weren't surprised by the surgery announcement. They were surprised it took so long. For years, ARMYs had compiled moments from concerts and behind-the-scenes content where Youngi's shoulder visibly bothered him. There are clips of him subtly rotating the joint between songs, adjusting his arm positioning during choreography in ways that a trained eye can recognize as compensatory movement. His body unconsciously protecting the damaged area by shifting strain to surrounding muscles, which of course creates its own cascade of secondary problems over time. There are moments in BTS's own reality content where members gently tease him about being careful with his shoulder, and his response is always the same, a dry, dismissive laugh followed by a subject change, classic Youngi deflection. But the emotional layer underneath all of this is what elevates Suga's story beyond just idol gets hurt. This injury is inextricably linked to his origin story, to the poverty, the hustle, the refusal to let circumstances dictate his future. He got hit by a car while doing a job he only needed because the industry he was trying to break into didn't pay trainees enough to survive. And then that same industry's culture of disposability forced him to hide the resulting injury for fear of losing the very opportunity he'd been suffering for. It's a cycle of pain rooted in systemic failure, and Youngi, to his immense credit, has never shied away from naming it. His music, particularly the August D mixtapes, directly addresses the physical and emotional toll of his journey, with lines that reference his shoulder, his mental health struggles, and the cost of making it in an industry that chews up and spits out kids who don't fit the mold. And then, layered on top of the shoulder saga, there was the appendicitis. In 2013, shortly after BTS's debut when the group was still fighting for every scrap of public attention and couldn't afford to lose a single member from their schedule, Suga required surgery for acute appendicitis. Appendicitis isn't an injury in the traditional sense, it's a medical emergency, but the timing was brutal, pulling him away from activities during a period when every music show appearance, every fan signing, every broadcast opportunity was critical to the group's survival. He returned quickly, perhaps too quickly by medical standards, because that's the pattern with Youngi. Get hurt, get fixed, get back, don't talk about it. Suga sits at number 4 because the severity of his injuries, a torn labrum carried for nearly a decade, a surgery that sidelined him at the peak of BTS's global dominance, and an emergency appendectomy during the group's most vulnerable period, is undeniable. But the members above him carry histories where the injuries were either more frequent, more publicly catastrophic, or left consequences that couldn't be surgically resolved. Youngi's shoulder got fixed. His story, while harrowing, has a resolution. For number 3, the resolution isn't quite so clean, and the injury involves a moment so shocking that even the member himself didn't fully process what happened until the adrenaline wore off. Number 3. J-Hope, the sunshine dancer whose knees were silently crumbling under every smile. Let's get one thing straight before we dive into this. When you talk about dance and BTS, you're talking about J-Hope. Not as a preference, not as a fan opinion, but as an objective, structural fact. Young Hoseok is BTS's main dancer, the member whose technical foundation in street dance, popping, locking, and hip-hop choreography became the physical backbone that every group formation, every practice session, and every stage arrangement was built around. When choreographers brought routines to BTS, they calibrated the difficulty to what J-Hope could do. When members struggled with a sequence, it was J-Hope who stayed behind in the practice room to drill it with them. When the lights went up on those massive award show stages that K-pop fans dissect frame by frame, it was J-Hope who anchored the center formations during the most technically demanding sections because he was, simply put, the most reliable body on that stage. And that reliability came at a price that his knees have been paying for over a decade. Here's what most people don't think about when they watch a dancer perform. Every jump has a landing, and every landing sends shockwaves through the knee joint. Every sharp pivot, every rapid directional change, every time a dancer drops to the floor and springs back up, the knee absorbs force equivalent to several times the body's weight. Now multiply that by 6 to 12 hours of daily practice during comeback preparation, multiply that by weeks of rehearsal, multiply that by concert runs spanning dozens of shows across months, and multiply that by years. Over a decade of performing at the highest intensity level in an industry that treats rest as an afterthought. That's J-Hope's reality, and his knees have been sending distress signals for years that only the most attentive fans and, presumably, BTS's medical team fully understood. The knee issues weren't a single dramatic blowout. They were a slow, grinding deterioration that manifested in ways you'd only catch if you knew what to look for. Fan-compiled footage from across multiple tour eras shows a pattern that's both impressive and heartbreaking. J-Hope adjusting his stance between songs to take pressure off one knee, subtly shifting his weight distribution during choreography so that certain moves land on his stronger leg, and occasionally, just occasionally, reaching down during transitions to press against his kneecap in a gesture that anyone who's dealt with joint pain would recognize instantly. He wasn't clutching it. He wasn't making a scene. He was checking in with a body part that he knew could betray him at any moment and making split-second calculations about what he could and couldn't push through. And this is where J-Hope's personality becomes both his greatest asset and his most dangerous vulnerability, because Young Hoseok is Sunshine. That's not just a nickname. It's an identity he's built so thoroughly that the line between the persona and the person has blurred into something almost seamless. J-Hope smiles when he's happy. J-Hope smiles when he's nervous. J-Hope smiles when he's exhausted, when he's overwhelmed, and critically, when he's in pain. That smile is a fortress, and behind it, he managed to keep the full extent of his physical struggles away from the public eye for far longer than should have been possible. There were specific moments, though, that cracked the facade wide open. During live concert performances across the Love Yourself and Map of the Soul tour eras, there are documented instances where J-Hope hit the stage floor during a choreographed drop and came back up with a visible hitch in his movement, not a stylistic pause, but a recalibration, his body buying an extra half-second to manage a jolt of pain before the next 8 count demanded his full range of motion. In one widely discussed fancam, you can watch him execute a rapid sequence of floor work, rise up, and for just a fraction of a second, maybe 2 frames of video, his expression fractures. The smile flickers. Something raw and involuntary flashes across his face before he catches it, files it away, and slams back into performance mode as if his knees aren't screaming at him from the inside. It's the kind of moment that armies screenshot, circle in red, and share with captions that are equal parts admiration and anguish. But the knees weren't the only battlefield. J-Hope's commitment to his dance role meant he was consistently the member logging the most practice hours, and with that came the full spectrum of physical wear, ankle sprains from rehearsals on hard studio floors, muscle strains from pushing through fatigue, and at least one notable concert incident where he slipped during a wet stage sequence and absorbed an impact that would have taken a less conditioned performer out of the show entirely. He didn't leave. He got up, found the beat, and slotted back into the formation as if the fall had been choreographed. The backup dancers didn't miss a step. The members barely reacted. It happened so fast that the live audience might not have even registered it, but the fancam cameras caught everything, and within hours, the footage was being analyzed by worried fans who knew that J-Hope's body was fighting a war of attrition it couldn't win forever. And then there's the dimension that makes J-Hope's story uniquely painful within the group dynamic, his role as the mood maker, the emotional anchor, the member who holds the team together during dark moments. When Youngie was recovering from shoulder surgery, J-Hope picked up extra. When members were visibly tired during long tour stretches, J-Hope was the one hyping the group backstage, keeping energy high, making sure the atmosphere never dropped. That emotional labor is invisible but exhausting, and it meant that even when his own body was faltering, he couldn't afford to show it, because the team needed their sunshine. And young Hoseok would rather dance on broken knees than let his brothers see the clouds. What separates J-Hope at number 3 from the members below him is the cumulative, chronic, compounding nature of his damage. Jungkook had dramatic incidents, but bounced back with the resilience of youth. Suga carried one major injury for years, but eventually got the surgery that addressed it. J-Hope's knees didn't offer that kind of clean narrative. They just kept wearing down, show after show, year after year, with no single surgical fix that could reverse a decade of impact absorption. His injury story isn't a chapter. It's a slow, continuous sentence that hasn't finished being written yet, and every performance he gives adds another word. J-Hope lands at number 3 because his body paid the longest, most consistent tax of any dancer in the group, and because the smile he used to hide it might be the most expensive performance he's ever given. But if you think chronic, hidden damage is the worst this list gets. Number 2 involves a member whose injury was so visible, so sudden, and so bloody that it became one of the most talked about moments in BTS's entire live performance history. Number 2. RM. The god of destruction whose body kept breaking in ways nobody could predict. Every group has a clumsy member. Every fandom has that one idol they joke about wrapping in bubble wrap before letting him leave the house. But Kim Namjoon, RM, the leader of BTS, the man with a verified IQ of 148, the speaker at the United Nations General Assembly, the lyrical architect behind some of the most profound songs in modern pop music, elevated accidental self-injury to a level so consistent, so bizarre, and so relentlessly documented that it stopped being a joke and started being a genuine medical curiosity. They call him the god of destruction, and every single army on the planet knows why, because there is not a Bangtan bomb, not a Run BTS episode, not a behind-the-scenes clip in existence where Namjoon isn't breaking, dropping, smashing, tripping over, or somehow physically colliding with something that was perfectly stationary and minding its own business 2 seconds before he entered the frame. But here's where the narrative shifts from comedy to something that actually earns him the number 2 spot on a list about injuries, because when you compile every documented incident across over a decade of content, the pattern isn't funny anymore. It's staggering. Let's start with the hands, the most frequently injured part of Kim Namjoon's body, and arguably the most ironic, because these are the hands that write lyrics consumed by millions, the hands that produce beats that shaped an entire genre's evolution, the hands that hold a microphone on stages that sell out in seconds. These hands have been cut, scraped, bruised, bandaged, and battered more times than any fan archive can fully catalog. There are clips of Namjoon casually showing fresh cuts on his fingers during live broadcasts as if they're as routine as brushing his teeth, and the terrifying thing is, for him, they might be. He's sliced his hand opening packages, caught his fingers on equipment backstage, scraped his knuckles on door frames, and on multiple occasions showed up to official schedules with visible bandaging that he either laughed off or completely ignored when fans asked about it. The frequency isn't normal. It's not, oh, everyone gets a paper cut sometimes. It's a pattern of physical misadventure so relentless that members have joked, with varying degrees of genuine concern underneath the humor, about not letting Namjoon near anything sharp, fragile, expensive, or structurally important. But the hands are just the opening act. Namjoon's injury resume extends to virtually every part of his body and every environment he's ever existed in. During concerts, he stumbled on stage risers, caught his foot on wiring, and misjudged distances between himself and stage structures in ways that left visible marks. During the filming of Bon Voyage, BTS's travel reality series, Namjoon managed to turn vacation activities into accidental injury showcases, bumping into things, tripping on flat surfaces, and demonstrating a spatial awareness so uniquely challenged that the editors didn't even need to add sound effects because the real-life thuds were dramatic enough. And during Run BTS episodes, where the members engaged in physical challenges ranging from sports to cooking to escape rooms, Namjoon was statistically the member most likely to end a segment with a new bruise, a torn piece of clothing, or a broken prop that had survived every other member's handling without incident. There's a famous compilation, multiple versions exist, each one longer than the last, because fans keep finding new footage of every single thing Kim Namjoon has broken on camera. Sunglasses snapped in half. Luggage handles ripped clean off. Studio equipment jostled off tables. Hotel room fixtures accidentally dismantled. The compilation runs for minutes, and every clip is real, unscripted, and captured with the resigned sighs of 6 other members who have long accepted that being in a group with Namjoon means budgeting for replacement items. But now strip away the comedy and ask the serious question: what does it mean for a person's body to be in a constant, low-grade state of injury? Because that's what Namjoon's life actually looks like when you remove the laugh track. This is a man who is almost never not healing from something. There's always a bandage somewhere. There's always a bruise fading while a new one forms. There's always a cut that's just closed up next to one that's fresh. And unlike the other members on this list, whose injuries were tied to specific events, a car accident, a torn ligament, a diagnosed condition, Namjoon's damage is ambient. It's environmental. It's woven into the fabric of his daily existence in a way that doesn't produce one dramatic headline, but instead generates a continuous, never-ending background hum of physical wear that is, in its own way, just as taxing as a single catastrophic blow. Consider the toll on his body across a world tour, not just from the performances themselves, which are demanding enough for any member, but from the travel, the airports, the hotels, the backstage areas, the press rooms, all environments where Namjoon's particular brand of physical misfortune turns ordinary objects into hazards. He doesn't get to just be tired from performing. He's also nursing whatever new injury his body has collected from the 27 mundane interactions he had between waking up and reaching the stage. And through all of it, through every bandaged finger, every bruised shin, every sheepish laugh covering another collision with a stationary object, he leads. That's the part that doesn't get enough attention. Namjoon isn't just the clumsy member. He's the leader. He's the one who speaks in press conferences, who mediates group dynamics, who carries the emotional weight of decisions that affect 7 careers and millions of fans. He does all of that while being, quite literally, in a perpetual state of minor physical damage. There's no surgery for being the god of destruction. There's no recovery timeline. There's no point where a doctor says you're healed, because by the time one injury fades, 3 more have already taken its place. It's not dramatic. It's not cinematic. But it is relentless, and over the span of a career as long and as physically demanding as BTS's, that relentlessness adds up to a body that has sustained more individual instances of injury than perhaps any other member, not in severity, but in sheer, mind-boggling volume. RM earns number 2 because his pain wasn't singular, it was infinite in its variety, unpredictable in its timing, and impossible to prevent because the source of the danger was, quite simply, himself. But number one is different. Number 1 is the member whose injury story involves blood on a live stage, surgery that threatened the one thing he's most famous for, and a level of quiet endurance that, when you finally hear the full picture, will make you understand why he sits alone at the top of this list. Number 1, Jin, the eldest soldier who bled on stage, broke his hand for music, and never once asked the world to feel sorry for him. And here he is, the man at the very top of a list nobody in this fandom wants to exist, but everyone needs to hear. Kim Seokjin, the eldest. The broad-shouldered Hyung who learned to cook for 6 younger brothers because someone had to, who cracked dad jokes on red carpets to cut the tension because someone had to, who stood at the back of formations for years without complaint because someone had to, and who, when his body started breaking in ways that would have ended lesser careers, simply wrapped the wound, adjusted his smile, and walked back onto the stage because, once again, someone had to. And that someone was always Jin. Let's start with the injury that still makes fans flinch when they see the footage. The moment Kim Seokjin bled on a live stage and didn't stop performing. During a concert, captured in multiple fan cams that have collectively accumulated millions of views, Jin sustained a cut during the show. Not backstage where it could be quietly handled. On stage. Under lights. In front of tens of thousands of fans who were watching every move on massive LED screens that magnified every detail to an almost surgical degree. The source varied depending on the account. A sharp edge of stage equipment, a prop malfunction, a collision with a set piece during a high-energy transition, but the result was the same: blood. visible, unmistakable blood on his hand, and later on the microphone he was holding. And Kim Seokjin looked at it, processed it in about half a second, and kept singing. Not in a he didn't notice way. He noticed. You can see it in the fan cams, that brief glance down, the micro expression of recognition, and then the conscious, deliberate decision to continue as if his body hadn't just been opened up by the very stage he was standing on. Staff eventually reached him during a transition and applied quick first aid, but by then, he'd already performed through multiple songs with blood on his fingers, gripping a mic that was slippery with it and delivering vocals that didn't waver by a single note. That clip alone would be enough to earn respect, but it's just the opening chapter of why Jin sits at number 1. Because the injury that truly defined his physical saga, the one that sent shockwaves through the fandom and raised genuine questions about the future of his career, was the finger. In 2019, Big Hit Entertainment released an official statement that Jin had undergone surgery to repair the extensor tendon in his left index finger, damaged during what was described as everyday activities. An extensor tendon is the mechanism that allows you to straighten your finger, and when it tears or detaches, the finger physically cannot extend on its own. It curls. It becomes functionally limited. For a normal person, that's an inconvenience that surgery and physical therapy can address over weeks. For Kim Seokjin, a performer who uses his hands constantly on stage, who plays guitar during acoustic segments, who gestures and interacts with fans during concerts, who needs full dexterity for choreography that involves intricate hand movements and formations, a damaged extensor tendon is a direct threat to his ability to do his job. The surgery was successful, but recovery wasn't a straight line. Jin was spotted at multiple events in the weeks and months following with splints, bandages, and protective wrapping on his left hand, and here's the part that makes ARMYs want to scream. He kept performing. He adjusted his choreography. He modified his grip on the microphone. He found ways to participate in every stage, every fan meeting, every broadcast, without ever once using his injured hand as a reason to sit out. While other members with injuries had moments of being visibly sidelined or performing from a chair, Jin, with a surgically repaired finger that was still in active rehabilitation, stood in formation and executed choreography that his doctors almost certainly told him to avoid. The cast came off eventually, the splint disappeared, but fans who tracked his hand movements in subsequent performances noticed something that never fully went away, a subtle caution in how he used that left hand. A tendency to favor the right side during certain gestures, and occasional moments where he'd flex the finger between songs as if testing its range, reassuring himself that it was still cooperating. The tendon healed, but the trust between Jin and his own body had been fractured in a way that doesn't show up on an X-ray. And then, just when you think the story might settle into a recovery arc, came military service. Jin, as the eldest member, was the first to enlist in December 2022, entering the Republic of Korea Army's mandatory service at an age when his body was already carrying over a decade of idol-level physical wear. Military training in South Korea is not ceremonial. It's grueling, physically relentless, and designed to push recruits to their absolute limits regardless of whether they sold out Wembley Stadium last year. Jin went through it all, the drills, the marches, the combat training, the physical conditioning programs designed for men a decade younger, and reports emerged that he sustained additional injuries during his service. The specifics were kept largely private, respecting both military protocol and personal boundaries. But what filtered through fan networks and official updates painted a picture of a man whose body was being tested yet again in an entirely new environment that offered none of the accommodations the entertainment industry could provide. There were no modified choreographies in the army. There were no staff members waiting in the wings with ice packs and bandages. There was just a soldier named Kim Seokjin, doing what he was told, carrying what he was handed, and enduring what he was subjected to, with a finger that had already been surgically reconstructed and a body that had already spent 10 years being pushed past every reasonable limit. But here's the emotional core of why Jin earns the number 1 spot, and it goes beyond any single injury, any surgery, any bleeding stage, or military bruise. So there it is, 7 members, 7 stories of pain, sacrifice, and an almost frightening refusal to stop. Let's bring it all together one final time. Here's the truth this list reveals: BTS didn't just break records. They broke their bodies doing it. Every sold-out stadium, every flawless music show stage, every iconic award ceremony performance that fans replay millions of times was built on a foundation of physical pain that these 7 men chose to absorb rather than show. The choreography that looks effortless? It cost ligaments, tendons, skin, and sleep. The smiles that look natural? They were often performed through gritted teeth and anti-inflammatory medication. That they make it look easy reaction that casual viewers have? It's the greatest illusion in modern entertainment, because nothing about what BTS does to their bodies is easy. Not a single thing. And maybe that's the real takeaway from this entire countdown. It's not about ranking who suffered more. It's about recognizing that behind every perfect fancam, behind every trending hashtag, behind every BTS outsold tweet, there's a human body that paid a price the audience will never fully see. 7 bodies. 7 price tags. One group that decided, every single time, that the show mattered more than the pain. That's BTS. That's the cost. And now you know.